Hey, I'm Dr. Ian Stolman, and I want to talk to you about something that brings a lot of young babies into our office, which is difficulty breastfeeding. We see a lot of young moms come in and they really want to feed their baby and they really want to have a great breastfeeding relationship, but they're struggling. Either it's painful or the latch is ineffective or baby's nursing better on one side versus the other. For whatever reason, there are things that are getting in the way of that breastfeeding relationship from being fully established. And even in situations where they've met with lactation consultants and they've engaged with La Leche League and they've done all of these other things, they are still struggling. And chiropractic is posed to provide support in a unique way that I think more and more moms need to hear about. You see, it all comes down to the alignment in the top part of the neck. When you think about the birth process, whether it's the compression going through the birth canal and then the pulling on their neck during a vaginal or a cesarean birth, there's a lot of trauma that young babies experience in the top bone of the neck. And when that bone is shifted out of position and it's restricted in its motion, it interferes with breastfeeding in four ways. The first is that it causes that top bone to not move as well. You see, 80 degrees of rotation, 40 degrees each way, relies on that top bone in the neck. And so if that bone is rotated in a specific direction, it's going to make it very difficult for that child to fully engage and sustain an entire breastfeeding session on one side versus the other. This is where moms notice that kids feed better on one side and not the other, or the latch is painful on one side and not the other. So it all comes down to how that bone moves. Additionally, when that top bone is subluxated, when it shifts, it affects the muscles not only throughout the neck, but even into the jaw, affecting the ability of that child to open their mouth and close it. So if you hear of moms where the baby has a painful latch, or it feels like they're biting down, or they're not opening their mouth wide enough in order to take the entire nipple into their mouth, that makes a big difference there as well. Additionally, when that top bone shifts, it compromises the cranial nerves that not only control the motion and movement of the jaw, it also affects the tongue and the lip and tongue, the entire oral fascial connection. And so what we see is that if that top bone is shifted, compromising that nerve flow, the tongue may not move as well, or you may not have an appropriate sucking and swallowing reflex that occurs. And then finally, because that top bone is kind of the gateway between the brain and the rest of the body, if that bone is shifted, it can compromise what's called the cerebrospinal fluid, which normally nourishes and provides support to the brain and then goes down the spinal cord to the tailbone and then back up. And so when that bone is shifted, it causes that fluid to build up in the brain. And what happens is when babies start to latch and they really start to suck to try to facilitate the letdown, it becomes pressure, it becomes a lot of discomfort. And what we'll see is they'll pull off the breast and they'll arch backwards and they'll be very uncomfortable, which is something that a lot of women experience. So if you're in a situation, or if you know somebody who's in a situation where you're breastfeeding and the baby has a preference of one side versus the other, or the latch is painful, or it's ineffective, or the baby seems uncomfortable, those are all signs that that top bone in the neck may be shifted, and it's something that chiropractic could potentially help with. The thing that I really want you to understand about chiropractic is that there's no twisting, popping, or cracking when we're talking about little babies. Because the joint is so susceptible to shifting, it's also so much easier to correct. You don't have the years of muscle memory and movement patterns that mom or dad have. And so as a result, it's about the amount of pressure that it takes to test the ripeness of a tomato. It's very gentle, but in doing so, by realigning that top bone, it allows babies to better engage the breast on both sides. It allows them to open their mouth, to have a good sucking and swallowing, and to be able to do so without creating intracranial discomfort. And so chiropractic poses tremendous support for moms and for babies to establish that breastfeeding relationship and be able to have a much easier time with that transition into motherhood. So if you have any specific questions, please post them below. Let me know what's going on with you and your family, and let me know if there are any other topics that you'd like me to cover. But if you're looking for a chiropractor for your family, visit ICPA, the number 4, kids.com. That's the website for the International Chiropractic Pediatric Association, and you'll be able to find a pediatric chiropractor by zip code and hopefully make it easier for you and your baby. Thank you.